Still baffles me how one man seems to balance it all. Father, serial businessman, billionaire. I spent the last month learning about him, day in and day out, trying to understand what he does, what makes him so popular. Religiously reading his book, maybe too religiously, in fact, in between all the noise and drama. Let's talk about Femi Otedola making it big. Yeah, so after nearly about 8 months of release, I'm sure we're not all strangers to Femi Otedola's making it big. And I remember when the book came out last year, there were a lot of controversies online, a lot of opinions. A lot of people said so many things about the book. Oh, this is just a rich man's way to make extra money, or like, he was a nepo baby, this, that, And so I anticipated reading the book, right? And I got a copy for myself and also for my dad as well. And I read Femi Odola's book last month. It was my book for the month, and I got to really get an insight into the man's life, into his rise to, stardom, fame, money, whatever, his business, his family, and all that. So this is my review of Femi Otedola's making it big. Now, as I said, we're going to start by addressing a few things about the book, right? Which is the controversy. Let's start from the controversies about who Femi Otedola is, his background, his parents, his father. Because for many of you that don't know, his father was once governor of Lagos State before military took over. And that gave, I think his background, right, and his kind of upbringing was was what exactly pushed the controversies about the book, right? Because while reading the book as well, sometimes I could not help myself but laugh at some things when you just see, he wanted to start something and he just called this person, he wanted to start something and he just reached out to this person. And a lot of people saw that as the whole essence of the book, basically, how are you telling people to do this, to do that, when they don't have the kind of access that you have, when they don't have the kind of upbringing that you have, when they don't have the kind of money that you have, and all that stuff, right? And to be very honest, they are very valid positions to take, right? And some people were saying things like, how is this going to help me make it big or something like that. So reading this book, one of the things that I quickly understood about the book was that, firstly, the book isn't really about trying to teach you how to make it big or what you have to do to make it big, right? It's more or less about what he had to do to make it big. So making it big is like a story of his own becoming or of his own rise to, being one of the juggernauts in the Nigerian industrial space, Nigerian business space, and all that stuff, right? So I think that if you shift your mind to the fact that the book is not like some manuscript for you to, if you take these steps that I took, if you take the steps that I took, you eventually make it to the top. I don't really think that's what the book is about, right? And I think that reading the book from that perspective is going to just keep you in critic mode instead of you having an open mind to what's this book actually trying to say? So I went to reading this book with a very open mind, I'm just going to take it as it is, right? I'm not going to feed into too much of the social media talk about the book, about what the book stands for or anything. I'm just going to take it as one man who wrote a book, and if I find any truth to it, fine. And if I find anything that does not, or I don't exactly resonate with, then I can just discard that. And as I said, if reading the book, you kind of understand a lot of things about his own personal life, right? I don't really know if everything is that was said in the book is the truth, and I don't know what are the lies in it, but I think the book has a very interesting. So I think the book has a very interesting story to it, and I think it has a lot of lessons that are very beneficial to whoever may be picking up this book. So remember I said that I got a copy for myself and for my dad, right? So I stopped reading the book for a very long time. Well, it wasn't actually my fault. I got the book in August. As soon as the book dropped, I made an order for the book, but my order didn't come until like November, December, thereabouts. So it was kind of like a struggle for me getting hold of my purchase and all that, but I was able to sort it out eventually, and I got the book. So when I got the book, I did not read it still because I had like a bunch of other books that were still in my lineup that I had not read, but my father read it immediately. So when he read it, it was so funny to me because we had like one of these father-son discussions, right? And he was talking to me about like, especially when I decided that okay, I was going to move out and reside on my own, right? And it was so funny because I remember when my dad came over to my house, so we had a discussion before he left, and he basically gave me two advice, right? And he said that one of the things that propelled him. So I think this book came as a miracle for me as well, because I broke to my parents in December that I was going to move out of the house after I graduated university, right? So my father was like saying something that this book was one of the things that propelled him to not have an issue with it. And he read about Otedola talking. Otedola basically mentioned how he lets his children just fly, basically, and do whatever they want, and he just gives them guidance and puts them in the hands of God. So that was the same thing that my father told me. He was like, okay, that he's not going to come in my way of deciding the path that I want to follow. The least that I can do for me, or the most that I can do for me, is just to give me word of advice. And he gave me two, basically. The first one that he gave me was that I should be very wary of friends, right? Which is a very, this does not relate to, I'm not saying my father took those piece of advice from this book, but Femi Otedola also mentions something very critical about friendship in the book that I will touch on in a bit. So he said I should be very wary of friends, who I let in my space, who I share information with, and all that stuff. And even before my father mentioned that to me, I'm somebody that I'm very careful with the kind of people that I keep around me and the kind of information that I give out, right? And the second advice was to shun fornication, right? Which was a very funny, it was funny, but it's very serious because he talked about the dangers of fornication and all that. But like, let's go back to reviewing Femi Otedola's book. Yeah, so back to the book review. Reading this book, I would segment my review into three, right? And I'll talk about, Otedola's making, right? The making of Otedola. This has to do like with his background, his education, his family, and why this is really tied to why this is really tied to the controversies that surround this book. So secondly, I'm going to talk about his rise to being a force to be reckoned with in the Nigerian business scene, as well as his fall and some of the things that he struggled with, what led to the fall, and then eventually how he was able to come back from all of it. So let's talk about his upbringing. So Femi Otedola did not have like a grass to grace story, right? Typical story that most Nigerians love to listen. Oh, his father was poor, they did not have food to eat, and from there he struggled after being a shoemaker. He doesn't have all that story, right? But he tried to, he tried to tie his business acumen to some of his childhood experiences, like how he used to clip nails for visitors that his father would bring, how that kind of sparked like some business, uh, whatever. But like, I find that very interesting. But I'm not going to take that out of the story, right? I'm not going to take that out of the story. And he also talked about like the kind of school that he went to. He went to school with some very prominent people's children and some very prominent figures today in the Nigerian business and political scene. And I think those are also one of the advantages that, helped him as he was having a steady rise. Eventually, he dropped out from school, or I'm not going to say he dropped out, but like he did not go to university. He decided to continue his father's business and all that. So that was the starting point for Femi Otedola, basically. Like, okay, this was what brought the money. As he said in the book, he always had like a business. He was always like a business venture guy, and that was like so his father's printing press business was kind of the starting point for him. And from then on, his father went ahead to run for governor of Lagos State. He became like his father's personal assistant. That also helps in building relationships as well. So I want to talk about how that ties to like a lot of controversies that surrounded this book, and a lot of reasons why many people dismiss the book. Like, oh, this is not like something that you need to read. It's just a man that was like, he fed off nepotism, blah blah blah, and all that stuff. So I think to look at the book from that angle is very short-sighted. I read the book with an open mind, and I did not, in as much as you can't really disregard the fact that like his upbringing and his education and his family played a huge role in his come up. I think when he goes on to explain certain things and tell certain stories in the book, it makes sense as to why you really can't just box people into like, oh, they had a rich father or they had a rich mother. I think that's a very important part of the story, but that is also just a part of the story, right? So then, fast forward, he started Zenon, which is like a diesel distribution company. And then he talked about a lot of struggles that he faced in Zenon, basically stemming from the fact that he did not have any serious corporate structure, and that's what led to the fall of Zenon. He talked about his rise to Zenon, which I picked something very important in that rise to Zenon. So the whole story of how he started Zenon was like, okay, diesel, everybody knows diesel, how diesel is in Nigeria, how we need diesel, how most companies run on, having an alternative source of power, which is always mostly the case with diesel. So he needed diesel to run his house, and then he had like a diesel delivery company come to his house and deliver the diesel. But they did such a messy job, and that kind of sparked the idea in him. He was like, I can clean up this business. Like, this business doesn't have to be this way, right? And I could really relate to that. And it might not make sense right now because I'm not willing to divulge a lot of information about certain things that I'm working on. But I could really relate to that because I've had so many instances where you patronize Nigerian businesses or where you patronize businesses in the country many times, and they do such a shabby job, such an unprofessional job. And I'm just like, why can't this just be a clean job? So why can't they just do it in a very professional way? And I'll give another example. I was watching like a popular Nigerian YouTuber, Daniel Agbaji. He's a popular videographer, filmmaker, and he also does YouTube as well. And in one of his YouTube videos that I watched, I think it was like a day or a week in my life, something like that video, he was trying to get printers or he was trying to get like a printing company to help him print something on like coffee cup or something like that. And it was like he searched online he saw a lot of printing companies online, right? But he called over 6 and nobody picked the phone. I'm just like, how do you run a business like that? How do you run a business? And like the most basic thing is that, okay, you put yourself out there on the internet with a registered phone number, but they call the phone number and nobody responds. I'm just like, I don't know. And when you look at the grand scheme of how many businesses in Nigeria is run, you will see a lot of similarities in this kind of attitude. Is either, oh, the social media takes like 3 days to respond to you, or nobody's picking your calls, or you get to the office, they revert you to somewhere else, they tell you to come back, they don't reach out, and all that kind of stuff. And I face similar situations too, right? Even right now, I'm dealing with something similar. I bought a laptop from a particular store. Laptop was having issues. I returned it. It's almost a month now, and they didn't even call me. And anytime I send a message to the WhatsApp, what I will get is, oh, please message this person, kinikon. And then I message the person doesn't respond for another 2 days. I'm just like, how do you run a business like that? So I could really relate to how it must have felt. Like, why did they do such an unprofessional job? And that sparked the idea of Zenon for him and how we started Zenon. Right? Just doing that same boring business, but way cleaner, delivering faster, being on time. And I always say this thing a lot, that in Nigeria, starting a business in Nigeria is very difficult, right? It's very difficult because of the way the landscape of the country is in terms of, macroeconomics and microeconomics and all that stuff. It's very difficult. It's difficult to get loans. It's difficult to, find startup money. But I always say that as a small business owner, and looking at things from, my outside lens, you can beat a lot of people by just doing the simple things well. You can beat a lot of people by just doing the simple things well. Like, oh, I'll be there by 8 and you are there by 8. Oh, I'll be there by 10 and you are there by 10. Oh, let's not even get started on Nigerian tailors. That's like another conversation on its own, right? I've worked with a Nigerian tailor before. At some point in my life, I was learning tailoring, right? And this is somebody that he has like a lot of outfits that he hasn't done yet, and he will still keep collecting orders, and he will still keep giving them very tight deadlines. And meanwhile, we'll be in the shop all day, and he probably will not even sew too. He will not even, many times he will just have drinks with his friends. His friends will come over, they'll buy alcohol, they'll gist, they'll talk. He will end up sewing one trouser, and that's close of business for that day, right? And if another customer walks into the door the next day, he's going to collect their material, right? And as I said, you can really beat a lot of people by just doing the basic things very well, like the simple things. Basically, deliver on time. When you say yes, your yes is your yes and your no is your no. So I think that sparked the rise of Zenon and how we started Zenon, starting a business and all that. So he faced troubles as well with the whole Zenon business, and eventually Zenon kept collapsing. I don't really want to spoil the book for people that might not have read it. So eventually Zenon collapsed, and again, a lot of reasons as to why Zenon collapsed. Mainly lack of organizational structure. Right, he was CEO, he was manager, he was CTO, he was everything. So it was like later in his life he had to learn about proper corporate structure, how to put certain things in place, how to ensure that, okay, you have somebody that manages this, you employ the right people. He talked about employing children of his friends, how they came in, no work ethic. A lot of things led to the fall of Zenon, mainly structural, no corporate structure, and also he ran into debt, right? He ran into debt worth billions and billions of naira. He was in a lot of banks. He had to give up a lot of assets, and so that was what basically led to the fall of Otedola, and how Otedola lost a lot of his assets. But he was able to come back, right? He was able to come back, and his comeback story was one I found very interesting. Because his entire comeback story was basically just learning from his mistakes. All the mistakes that he made at Zenon, he made sure that he did not make them at Fort Oil. He made sure that he did not make them when he had to rebrand and pick himself up again. And I also think that's a very important lesson as well in life, right? And it ministered to me in a way. It ministered to me in a way because in the journey of life, or in the journey of trying to figure out a lot of things about life and trying to, make something of yourself, or make your life somewhat meaningful, you will make a lot of mistakes on the way. You will make a lot of mistakes with the kind of friends that you will keep. You will make a lot of mistakes with the kind of deals that you will do with people. I've made those kind of mistakes as well. I've made a lot of them. But one thing is very important. If you don't learn from those mistakes, you are bound to have the same outcome, right? So I think it's a quote that says something like, a foolish man is someone that does the same thing repeatedly and expects a different outcome. So I think that was another takeaway from his comeback story. And his comeback story basically detailed how he had proper corporate governance, how he employed a better CEO, and somebody to, proper structures in place, how he employed the best people, how he made sure to not put his family into the business, and a lot of things and advice that he gave. So to cut the long story short, so in conclusion, in my review of this book, it was all a lie. Basically, it was all a lie. The people that said that, the book was just some Nepo's babies manual, it wasn't true. The book that said that, he just got his whole rise to, being a force to be reckoned with is because of the people that he knows in government, that also wasn't true. And people that said things like, it's because of his father's influence, that's why he was able to get to that's why he's able to get to where he got to in life, that also wasn't true. And as I said, you just have to pick up the book by yourself and read. It has a lot of valuable lessons, a lot. In fact, at some point, I stopped highlighting stuff in the book because it was just too much to highlight. So I think that if you are someone that is chasing something, right, you're trying to build yourself, right, you might not have a perfect story, right, and you might not make it big like Femi Otedola, but I think the lessons are very valuable to starting a new business, starting a new career, and trying to grow something meaningful, or trying to grow something small to something meaningful. So I think the book is going to help you a lot, and I gained a lot from reading the book. It was a very interesting read. It took me about a month and a half to completely finish the book, but I dropped the book with a lot more than I did when I picked up the book. So I think you should also get the book, and if you have a chance, you can also read it. That being said, I will be doing a giveaway of a copy of Femi Otedola's Making It Big, and the details of the giveaway will be in the description. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed this review, and I also hope that you have gained a lot of insights from reading the book as I did. Thank you very much. One take.